everyone, my name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. We are revisiting a very popular subject today. We are going to be talking about how to introduce kink to your partner the right way. Now, this is something that I talked about on my channel years and years ago to this point, so it is definitely something that needs to be revisited, because when I filmed that originally, I had never actually had to introduce kink to a partner before. I had only ever done BDSM with people who already knew what it was and already did BDSM themselves with other people. However, since then, I have now personally gone through the process of introducing kink to somebody for more or less the first time. So I have tons of new personal insight, some additional advice to share with you all, so I think it is well worth going over what my new tips and tricks are. So firstly, I think we need to recognize how freaking difficult it is to bring something like this up. Kink is still very stigmatized. It is definitely not totally in the mainstream at this point, and it can be very hard to know how to approach the subject with somebody you are in a newer relationship with that you don't really have a lot of trust with, or conversely, it can also be very difficult in an especially long-term relationship that is really important to you, where you're really bonded to the person and you don't want to accidentally mess that up by trying to add BDSM to it and then getting rejected. It can feel like trying to jump off of the highest diving board in the outdoor pool in the middle of winter. It sucks. But luckily, news for you here, the hardest part of this entire process is that first conversation. Just literally being able to open your mouth and say the words. So be patient with yourself, first of all, recognizing that this can be really hard and nerve-wracking, but also know that once you are able to approach the conversation, be brave, have some courage, because I promise it won't be as scary as you were thinking it's going to be. Now, honestly, before you even bring this up to a partner, I think the very, very first thing you need to do is to have a conversation with yourself first. What are your needs in BDSM? What are your interests? What is your desire for this particular relationship? Do you want to transition into a 24/7 power exchange relationship? Are you looking to have a particular fetish need met? Do you just kind of want to play around in the bedroom with some kinks and see how it goes? Or do you not even know yet? Do you want this to be a process of exploring with your partner and finding out what those interests are together? And also, how important is this to you? If they say no, kink's not really my thing, do you want to stay in this relationship, or is it a deal breaker? Are there potentially other matters that could come up along with this as well, such as maybe opening the relationship up if you have kink needs and your partner can't do that with you? So if you are the one approaching the subject of kink with a partner, I think it is vital to have a deep understanding as much as you can for what you want from this, to make sure that you're not going to be as tempted to compromise on important things or minimize your needs or capitulate to your partner in order to avoid having a difficult conversation with them. Or if you're just wanting to be open to experimentation, being honest about that ahead of time, that you're not really sure where this path is going to lead. And remember, always during this whole process, the people in the relationship are more important than the relationship itself. Your happiness matters, and maintaining a relationship that doesn't serve your happiness is ultimately going to be destructive for you in the long term. Now, from there, I think the next most logical step is to get an initial understanding of your partner's reaction to kink as a concept. Now, very personal hot take here, but I don't think it's worth it to spend a lot of emotional energy trying to explain BDSM to somebody who is fundamentally opposed to it on all levels. So in order to avoid that unnecessary pain, what I would do is find a way to kind of float the concept out there in a non-personal manner. That could be through maybe asking them about their opinion of 50 Shades of Grey, or maybe showing them a funny viral YouTube video like the BDSM food porn star video from Comedy Central, or the Try Guys trying BDSM. That way you can kind of already gauge their initial impression of BDSM, or potentially if they already know a little bit about what it is. Now, if your partner has a hardcore negative reaction to BDSM just from the casual mention of it, like maybe for them BDSM reminds them of their childhood abuse, for example, I would not necessarily continue that conversation, because again, I don't believe in expending a lot of emotional energy on somebody that just isn't going to be into BDSM in the first place. But if they have a little bit more of an open reaction, this is the scary part. This is where you have to take that icy plunge of vulnerability. Depending on where your relationship is at, I think this generally means just introducing BDSM in a more obvious fashion. That could be through sharing porn that features some BDSM elements to it. That could be through talking about, again, more like viral YouTube videos, or maybe showing them an erotica or a book that contains BDSM elements in it, or maybe watching a movie that has some kink to it as well. That could also look like sharing some funny kink memes and saying that you feel similarly to them. Or maybe you like being really direct and you just want to ask them straight out, hey, I think I might be into BDSM. Is that something that you're also into? However, if you're that brave of a person, I assume you don't need my advice on how to have this conversation. Speaking of which, I don't want to make anybody panic here, but how you approach this subject is everything. The words that you use, your tone of voice, will cause your partner to react in kind. So if you bring it up as this super world-shattering dramatic thing, like a soap opera episode, your partner is going to respond in a very dramatic, world-shattering fashion, because that's the energy that you brought into the conversation. So instead, what I have found is the best outcome comes from treating it as a positive bonding thing for the relationship, brought about in kind of a casual fashion, emphasizing that this can be a good thing that you can do together. So that might look like, for example, saying, oh wow, I've been reading about this really interesting thing. Would this be something that you are open to trying together? Or wow, this seems super hot. Is this something that you have had any experience with before? And you would be very surprised. There are actually a lot of people where both parties secretly want to add BDSM to the relationship, but they feel like they can't broach that subject, and as soon as the other partner brings it up, they're like, wow, actually I've been super into this the whole time, but I was nervous to tell you about it. Now, assuming your partner doesn't actually have any prior experience in kink, I think it is a really good idea to go over some basic terms and concepts, things like aftercare and safe words, because I think that can be very reassuring for people, because if you don't really know a lot about BDSM, it can seem really scary. And so having that reassurance of like, oh, there's aftercare, there's safe words, there's all these things built in that make it a little bit safer than what you might assume, can help people feel just better overall about the concept and actually doing it in real life. There's actually a book that was recently recommended to me that's called How to Start a Kinky Relationship, which I will link down below, which can be very helpful in this process. And I would always encourage you to encourage your partners to do their own research, to discover things for themselves. Now, you can do things together. I think it can be a wonderful activity to spend an afternoon Googling BDSM stuff together or reading chapters from a book together, but also making sure that they have their own space to explore what they want to and learn on their own is ultimately, I think, a positive thing to do. And no matter how they learn best, there are tons of options out there online. That could be through books, that could be through articles on websites, YouTube videos like this one, podcast episodes, audiobooks. There are lots of ways to approach learning about kink, even if you are in quarantine and you can't necessarily go out to a BDSM dungeon right now. And what's great is even if they are learning on their own, when they do find a good article or watch a video or finish a chapter of a book, that's another opportunity to have a conversation about kink and what their current thoughts and feelings about it are. Some other good tools to use would be things like checklists, maybe a yes, no, maybe checklist, or quizzes online even can be quite helpful, just to get a general sense of some of the things that you are into and that your partner is into. Now, if you do things like this, like let's say the BDSM test, the really famous one, I think it's a good idea to do them separately and then compare answers afterwards. Because if you are taking it with a partner side by side, you might be tempted to alter your answers based on what you think your partner will be okay with versus what is genuinely true for you. And so I think in order to have the most honest process, I think it's a good idea to do things independently and then talk about it afterwards. Now, the downside is that these inventories tend to be quite vast, and so maybe it makes more sense for your relationship to introduce just one concept at a time and build from there, but sometimes quizzes can be quite fun as well. And if you are somebody that has already had experience in kink and the person that you're doing this with doesn't have any, I do think it is worth it to make sure that the ball is always in their court, that they are the one to sort of lead the conversation and ask questions, and then you respond to that. So you are not necessarily putting your expectations on to them. And I do believe in general that you should go at the pace of the less experienced partner in that relationship. So what that would look like is, for example, asking your partner about the things that they might be curious in trying. And let's say they say, I think I'm into uniforms and ball gags and handcuffs. And you're like, okay, great. In my head, I'm thinking, well, I know I am into uniforms for sure. Not really that into handcuffs, but I do know quite a bit about ball gags and I would be happy to try them with this person. Then great, you've already established some mutual overlap. You kind of already know what they feel most comfortable exploring and where that lines up with your needs as a good place to start from. Now, this is potentially a little bit less than kosher, shall we say, but I think from my experience, it is easier to introduce BDSM to somebody that doesn't know anything about it from a framework that can be better understood from a vanilla context, from just having vanilla relationships be kind of the only thing the person's ever experienced. What this typically means is introducing BDSM as something as part of a sexual activity. That could be spanking during sex, or hair pulling, or wearing a gag, something along those lines. Now, this isn't the only way to do it. I think you can also introduce BDSM in other types of non-sexual BDSM intimacy. Maybe that means you use some metal claws while scratching somebody's head, or you give them a foot rub after work. Or maybe you introduce the use of titles into your text message conversations, for example. And I think trying out these things in wherever their comfort zone currently is at is, again, going to have the best possible results. Because once they get comfortable with that, once they understand kind of BDSM in a framework that is natural to them, then you can start to build beyond that. Introduce more kinks that you are into, find more things to explore with them that they're curious about, and before you know it, over time, you have fully graduated into doing BDSM just by itself versus only as a bedroom activity. Assuming that's what you want. If you just want to do BDSM as a sex thing in the bedroom, great, perfect. If you want to do BDSM as something only on the weekends, great, perfect. But whatever your goal looks like, starting from that kind of one narrow place and building out from there, I think is usually the best option. Now, understand in this process that you are not always going to be compatible on everything. It would be very unusual, even for people who are both into BDSM before that relationship starts, to have all of the same kinks, to want to do all of the same things. It's about finding those places where you do have overlap instead of expecting that you're going to be into all of the same things equally. And once you have done that hard work of introducing BDSM, doing it in a reassuring way, finding sort of your first couple ways of introducing BDSM in the relationship as a whole, that's really all of the hard stuff. From there, it's just a continual process of communication, communication, communication. Communication is the cornerstone of all BDSM, but especially new BDSM, early BDSM relationships, where it is so important to be constantly checking in with your partner more than you need to. Talk about everything. Talk honestly with each other. Make sure you can have that base level of trust to where your partner can say, no, I'm not really interested in that. Or yes, this thing is really important to me. You need to be able to do that in order to have a good, healthy, long-term BDSM relationship. Whether that looks like a 24/7 total power exchange dynamic or just something casually in the bedroom. Now, if you are getting to the point where you're trying to figure out how to do your first scene, how to overcome differences in experience level, for example, I have tons of videos on those subjects, so please check them out. I also have an entire BDSM 101 playlist if you want to start from the very beginning with introducing those important concepts and terms to your partner. So please check that out. They'll be down in the description box below, because this video by itself is really just the start of a long journey. Now, one final note that I want to end this video on is just to remember that you can't make somebody be into BDSM. You can help somebody work through their guilt and their shame that they might have. You can help them discover things about their sexuality that they didn't know before. You can help them become more comfortable with different terminology or different things they weren't even aware of beforehand. But if they are not interested in BDSM, you can't suddenly make them be interested in it. Some people are just not kinky, and that's totally fine. And I think we should respect people that aren't into BDSM as much as we want to be respected for the choices and the desires that we have for our relationships as people that are into kink and BDSM. But yeah, you can't make somebody be something that they aren't on the inside. Now remember, as always, this is supposed to be a fun process, a new way of bonding with your partner, deepening your relationship, building trust and honesty and vulnerability, all things that can be so rewarding and make your relationship that much better and stronger. So please keep that in mind. Hopefully this video helped you feel a little bit more brave in starting that journey. Now, if you have any other comments or questions, you can go ahead and leave them down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this, if you want to see more from me, please do subscribe. I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And of course, as well, do remember that you can also support me over on Patreon. A link to that will be down in the description box below. That allows me to share content that I can't necessarily put here on YouTube, as well as offer you guys a lot of extra fun things like a Discord chat and photo shoots. So again, please check that out down in the description box below if you haven't already. If you already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you guys next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.